Welcome to our discussion on the future of real estate and more so about workplace strategy, what you should do with your real estate, with your office space going forward. This event is organized by the European American Chamber of Commerce, where Americans and Europeans connect to do business. My name is Yvonne Bendinger-Rothschild. I'm the Executive Director of the EACC New York, and I will be your host and moderator today. We are joined today by two amazing experts in the field of real estate, Jody Police. She's the founder and CEO of JRT Realty Group, a woman-owned full-service commercial real estate firm, and JRT is recognized as the nation's largest certified women-owned commercial real estate firm. Jody is responsible for leasing and managing a portfolio of almost 10 million square feet. And she is an expert like few others when it comes to all things real estate related. Her colleague, Rachel Casanova, a senior managing director of workplace innovation at Cushman & Wakefield, has more than 25 years of experience advising companies on how to transform their real estate assets and realize their long-term business strategies to create workplace experiences unique to each company's corporate culture. Jody and Rachel are both experts on workplace strategy, and by that we mean how to optimize your office space, and they can both talk about the tenant and the owner side, which is what this program brings together. Both advise companies on how to build and implement dynamic workplace environments, and important for this discussion, how to optimize space utilization and future-proof offices and real estate portfolios. Jody will start the conversation and set the stage of where we are in terms of real estate utilization, what the market is doing in New York, and how we can optimize what we're doing with our offices going forward. Jody, you want to get us started?
Yes, thank you, Yvonne. I appreciate the introduction, and it's great to be a member. I was just telling Yvonne that I just found out that I've been a member for over 10 years now, back when One World Trade Center and the World Trade Center was really being pretty much constructed, and the European American Chamber came over for a tour. So we go way back as far as that's concerned. But we had formed, JRT is celebrating its 25th year anniversary. I'm a commercial real estate broker, and we will be celebrating our 25th anniversary in February. We formed a strategic alliance with Cushman & Wakefield to give us a global presence. Cushman & Wakefield has 250 offices throughout the country, so we have our foot on the ground in 250 different locations, and it gave us a global reach. So that was very important for JRT to establish. So because of this strategic alliance and because of the pandemic that we've seen, we've been working very closely with offices all around the world to have them understand what the pandemic is going to mean to them, not only now in the present, but certainly in the future. And you could move to the next slide, please. We have a plethora of different disciplines that we work with at Cushman & Wakefield along with JRT, and we offer them to all of the people that we work for, tenants, landlords, so that we could achieve certain results during this pandemic. Today, Rachel Casanova, who will be presenting workplace strategy to you, is from the Strategic Consulting Group, and I am working along with tenant representation, landlord representation, sales. So we are basically have all of these disciplines offered as Cushman & Wakefield and JRT. The next slide, please. So just to give you a little bit of an overview of the market, I'm sure you've known and I'm sure you've heard that leasing and sales are down. They're down around 50% in certain submarkets. We've heard that they're down up to 75%. Sublet space is extremely popular, and it's at a 26-year high. There's actually 20 million square feet of sublet space available and 40 million square feet of direct space available. So combined, it's 60 million square feet of space that's available. And that's when you think of 60 million square feet, it equates to all of the office space in Boston, Massachusetts. So it's quite a bit of space on the market.
Jody, if I may jump in with a question here right off the bat, I think it's interesting that there's so much sublet space available. I mean, EACC is subletting, and does that mean from the landlord perspective that companies are not shedding their office space, they're holding on to it, but they're financing it, financing the cost of it by subletting it to people who may have decided to shed? What do you see? What do you see in comparison in terms of people saying, I want to hold on to the space I got because if I let it go, I may have to buy it back more expensively, to people just abandoning the space? What's the percentage you see, or what are you hearing from the tenants, and how are the owners reacting to that?
So the absorption rate, which you're talking about, is practically negligible. And as far as tenants abandoning their space, you really, I mean, unless it's a very small tenant who isn't financially secure, you really don't hear of tenants that are reputable tenants abandoning space. And of course, all leases have all kinds of clauses that protect the landlord when tenants do decide that they don't want to pay their rent anymore. However, it does put the tenants in a very enviable position right now, because tenants looking for space are getting sublet spaces offered to them at less than what direct spaces are being offered to them. So now you have landlords and tenants competing in the same buildings, and who could offer the better deal? So certainly a sublet could offer a better deal than a landlord. So if you are a tenant in the market right now, you are competing with, you're not competing with anyone. Every landlord wants you, every sub-landlord wants you, and every landlord is doing anything they can to keep you if you're a tenant in the building. So if you're a reputable tenant who's been paying your lease and paying your rent, there is no reason why any landlord wants to lose you. They're trying to hold on to you, attract you, want you to stay. We've seen, I'm doing deals right now, and tenants are saving tons of money, because if their lease is coming up, and Rachel will get into it more, because with the pandemic, people want to understand what's their office space going to look like, how many seats are going to be taken, are people coming in 2 days, who's working from home, who's staying. I mean, to be honest, Yvonne, this was all going to happen anyway, because technology was beginning to accelerate people working from home, but now the pandemic really drove this through the roof. And Rachel, I don't think Rachel sleeps at night, because she's working on so many projects for workplace strategy, so that clients understand what it's going to look like when the vaccine's here, when people begin to come back to work, when children begin to go back to school, and when things open up.
Yeah, so I mean, I have to tell you, we had this conversation before. I'm not a fan of working from home. I mean, what you're seeing is my living room, so behind me. It's and I had this conversation with Rachel. She's laughing. But I think the key is really the schools coming back, and then people have more flexibility. I think we will definitely move to a more flexible work environment. Rachel, do you want to jump in on that and see what you're hearing in that regard?
Sure. I mean, it's a good place for me to kind of go through slides, if that's okay, talking about this.
Yeah, go ahead.
But yeah, this is the work that I do. It's the work I've been doing for 25 years. So some people think, oh, you've come into your time. No, we've been doing this for a long time. It's just that A, we're very popular at times of great change, and B, everyone is going through this change right now, so it is on everyone's mind. It's become part of kind of the mainstream media as opposed to an industry conversation. So I'll start with this by saying many clients look at these 4 questions, and they used to be independent questions, and there were times of a business cycle that clients would ask each one of them. So is my business strategy my long-term play? Do I have labor in the right place? Are we in the right locations? Can we recruit the people we need? Is my workplace supportive of the kind of work? And do I have the right real estate in the right cities? Right now, and I find this fascinating because my entry point largely was this bottom right, people who wanted to think about their workplace. Right now, everything has been thrown up into the air, and most clients are dealing with at least 3, if not 4 of these questions at the same time. So this is what's making it really challenging. Where are they getting on that street? And right now, the hierarchy is very hard to define. Everything is up for grabs. And the more you see it in mainstream media, the more you see a tech company saying we're letting people live anywhere, makes people question where are people going. We've heard, oh, people are moving to the Sun Belt, moving to Florida. That was happening before the pandemic. But now it's questioning, is my labor strategy right? And so we really can't figure out the workplace till we figure out who we're serving. So it just puts the context on why this is so hard right now, because all of these questions are what clients are asking themselves. The other thing that I would say that both Jody and Yvonne alluded to is I think this is understated. I don't think that when we talk about the future of the workplace, we're actually talking about a long-term future. I think the center of this slide, which is called pilots, is what anyone is imagining. But for us to get even there, I would say the first thing we need people to have confidence around the vaccine distribution, which Yvonne, you were talking about at the very beginning of this. You know, where are you allowed to go? Where is it safe? Until we're on that ramp back, we have no idea. You know, you will hear the most fervent supporters of, I am never leaving my house, I'm working from home, to please get me back to the office, I'm ready. So everyone wants to talk about a hybrid. Hybrid is not one thing. Hybrid is everything in between. We're all at home and we're all in the office. And by the way, we've known for a decade or more that never is an office at 100%. Most offices were operating where they utilize 60% of their space on any given day. High would be 70, 75%. But everything in between, all or nothing, is hybrid. And I would suppose that we're going to go through a lot of pilots. Take real estate out of the picture. This is all about behavior first. This is about business effectiveness first. So the question is, how are we going to work? Again, there's only a small portion of people who get a real estate play any given year. So there's plenty of people who have to figure this out in the spaces they occupy. Out of those pilots, we're all going to figure out what's working. And there will be new
Can I
norms.
jump in with a question on that? Because what I think is, and I didn't think of that before, it's not only about how you bring back the people, this is also how your workspace looks like. So we used to sublet at Pepper Hamilton, now Troutman Pepper. And they had like a big entrance area, very welcoming, big event spaces. And will offices need that kind of configuration going forward? If you don't, I think, we are planning at EACC to have live events again in September, God willing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
Are people reconfiguring their spaces? Is that something you're seeing? More hoteling?
I would say we're still here. Most people are imagining what they're going to do, but no one's left. We're still at 15% occupancy. So everything we're supposing is just as you said. We think we're going to have events in September. Someone else might be saying, we don't think we're going to travel in September. But it's all what we think. And I think we've anticipated so many steps of this as there's going to be a light switch. The way we went home was going to be a light switch back to the office. But that's why I say it's an on-ramp. I think different things are going to be okay sooner than others. Different people will be able to go before others. So there's going to be this on-ramp of tests. And that's what I call this pilot. And I think that clients are spending as little money as they can on this arrival they're not calling it pilots. I think we should call it pilots. But this is about changing people's behavior, moving furniture that can be moved, maybe investing in technology. But this isn't about redesigning, in my opinion, the space yet. We also don't know if we're going to socially distance. We don't know if we're going to be wearing masks. So there's so much unknown that the best we can do is scenario plan. In the situation where we come back with masks, will we be able to use conference rooms? In the situation where we've reached some sort of herd immunity, what will we do then? So that's why I also just keep thinking that everything is going to be a 3 to 6 month plan initially. So to invest in it, which one do you invest in? Therefore, I think more people are holding back. There were a number of people who spent money on the arrows and plexi and PPE for the office, right? There were those who came to us and said, how do I get this? How do I get the cleaning supplies and so on? And people slowed down, realizing that their employees weren't coming. So it's a yes and is the reality. There's no easy button. We don't know how this ends. But behavior change and policy change is cheap. If we say to our employees, listen, we're going to try this. Tell us what's not working. The entire world of workplace design has always been a response to evidence, right? We look at how people work and we design places that are conducive. When it was a newsroom, when it was a linear process where paper went one to the next, we had large open spaces. As we started to become knowledge workers, we changed that. As we started to do agile development, where it was a very different mode, we changed the environment. But the environment doesn't lead that, the environment responds to it. So we need to see these workplace norms
if you're talking about newsrooms, I've actually been in a newsroom, and I think that open space is extremely conducive how the news comes together. I mean, I've been to the Reuters newsroom at Times Square. And on that note, I mean, we had, in the New York Times building where we are, we had, what's the name of the company? They have like a blue dog. They are Datadog. They have this open office space, but they also have like some more private areas where with restricted client access. They were, the entire idea behind working in an environment was, happy, fun time, bringing people together, meeting in the cafeteria, feeding them all the time, like the Google offices. How is that going to jive? How are you tenants dealing with that? Keeping people happy and feeding them, and do you see anything? Because this was part of the lifestyle of working for a company like that.
Well, and this is the sort of secret message. It's not going to be that different from what you saw before, right? There were many companies who were doing that, who still were compelling people to come to work, because for the last decade, we didn't have to come to the office to get our work done. And people weren't. We just didn't have formality around policy. We might have asked for permission. We weren't set up to embrace it, perhaps. But so much of what you just described is what we anticipate. It's what people are missing. I think this gives you some context. We've done a survey that we administered this survey for the last 5 years, but we shifted the questions to the time that people were at home. There's 60,000 respondents, 3 million data points in this from around the globe. And what we found, and this is changing a little bit, but in around the May-June timeframe, people were effective at home. Obviously, companies had invested in what they needed to enable people to work anywhere. The adoption, I think, grew. So the feedback a few months in was, yes, I can focus and collaborate, but at the same time, my connection to culture, my connection to learning was suffering. So 50% of people were struggling to connect to company culture. We were not coming more well, though there is a sense that reduction in the commute and the ability to sort of work-life integration. I don't think you can call it balance for many people, but we were not learning to knit, learning to horseback ride. There's a lot of stress going on, so people weren't feeling especially well at home, and our youngest generations were having the hardest time. So whether it was because they didn't have the space, or they had caregiver responsibilities, or they came to their companies with the hopes of meeting people, of being mentored, creating cohesion, we did not replace it at home. So the results that we are seeing is that, yes, people want flexibility, not by special permission. They want that flexibility built in. But we're not seeing that people are now largely saying, I want to work from home. The work from home population before the pandemic was about 5% were at home all the time. There's a sense that that could double, but we're not talking about it hitting 50% of the population. And I would contend, back to my idea on this hybrid pilot, is that once we are now some in the office and some at home, I think more people are even going to be coming back than they think. It's simple when we're all doing this. But I think, again, we're understating what happens when people are in the office and they do share that cup of coffee, or they get that, access to the CEO who they walked past and had a 30-second conversation that changed their outlook, that connected them to company culture, that provided them perspective and the purpose for what it is that they do. Now, are there ways to replace that? Yes, but I would say that fewer organizations are capable of that transition. There's a reason workplaces existed, because it gave this scaled way to convey, whether it was through posters or conversations or how you dress and all of that. It provided that in one place. So what we see is that this is a drive to flexibility, but having people be flexible and have one day a week at home or whatever it is they need is very different from the connection we might make to our real estate solution.
Yeah, for sure. We have, and that might be a question for Jody. One of our members is sending a question in. We made the decision last year to never return to the office and have a work from anywhere model. However, in a post-COVID world, we will meet in person for company meetings and team building events. We intend to utilize shared workspaces and what we would call gig spaces. Will landlords convert more spaces for this kind of use? I think that's an interesting question. I mean, Judy, what do you think?
We have that already, right? We have the places like Convene and WeWork where that's happening right now. But I think the consistency of just having a workplace to go to where a company's operating out of is basically what Rachel is talking about. A lot of times when all of these surveys are taken, what people don't take into account is human nature. Sometimes human nature just cannot be measured. So I think that people generally, come to the city for I think what Rachel was speaking about, for the opportunity to build their professional, relationships up, for their advancement, for personal relationships, for the water cooler talk, just to build up like their collective energy and exchange ideas. I think that has to continue. I think that the WeWorks are too much of a plug and play where people are just coming and going, and there's just not a constant consistency of people being together. I mean, companies look at production. If the production levels are, what they are, and they're doing better, then I guess they will adapt more towards that type of office space. But in this particular place where we are right now, there's going to be companies that just survive, but there will be companies that thrive. And I think that, what Rachel's talking is in order to thrive, you have to be flexible to measure and to basically hear the hybrid situation, because the hybrid situation may be the way to thrive. So that's why everything's starting now you see people wanting to go back. I mean, Generation Z and the millennials, they don't want to be home. They want to be with each other. I mean, no matter what you say. So I think that, we do have WeWorks, we do have convenes. A lot of companies are doing that just for a year or 2-year study, but no one's doing that as a final, this is what we're going to do forever.
Yeah. And it could be an opportunity for companies, to like for the data, maybe not for the data dog people because they have a lot of privacy issues, but, for another company who, it takes more space and then uses that opportunity to sublet space on a case-by-case basis to, to other tenants, for as a meeting space, to sublet just a meeting space on a case-by-case basis.
Everything is a case-by-case basis. We did not have one solution before the pandemic. We're not going to have one at the end. So you're going to have an asset that people want so that you can do that. I find the comment interesting that the member made, and I think that's the point, that there are organizations who will thrive this way, who can say, we are as effective, this is what our people want. Now, I can't tell you that same person isn't going to come in 6 months and say, we tried it, but you know what? It wasn't working. So just because it's being done doesn't mean it's right. It's certainly right for them for now, and they will figure out if those coming together moments is sufficient. I do think that there's only certain organizations that are equipped to do it. I think at different scales, I don't know how large that company is, but at a scale of 20 to 30 people is very different than a scale of 500. And it's very different based on what you do. So I don't think to throw anything out as that's not what's going to happen, because we all create our own cultures. So I just think that it's hard work. There are some investments. You don't do that and just say, we're going to keep going as we're going. You make investments, whether it's those meeting days or whether it's something else on how you're going to onboard people, or new training for managers or new training for employees. There are ways, but not every organization can do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. But go ahead.
Well, I flipped through a few of these slides, but I just got to this one that we do know there is a value to coming together. We usually call the coming together the office. If it's done in a shared space where you rent it for a day, I still call that coming to the office. It just happens to not be the one that has your name on it when you're not there. But there continues to be evidence that coming together for some of these things is enhanced when we can physically come together. So this idea of mentorship and relationship building, and often the glue that keeps organizations together is how knowledge is shared. So how and where do we create environments for that? How do we create a sense of community and purpose, and that North Star idea that an organization has? How do we not kind of get off of that track? So places where people come together to hear and experience one message event, we do believe will remain really important. And then the bottom left is an example, creating this ubiquitous connectivity where the experience at home and the experience in the office is the same. We're in a little bit of a honeymoon period where we're all a rectangle on a screen. When we start to come back, some of us are in the office, some are not, and you go into a conference room, let's hope that the audio and video work well, but the people are sitting at the conference room table, you can't really necessarily read facial expressions because they're much smaller. And the people at home, as you see on the bottom left, are larger than life. So we're going to have to figure this out. And this ubiquitous connectivity, I actually think people may end up going back to their interfaces of their laptops because we've become familiar with we're all a rectangle. But how do we create that for everyone? And then I think that we're going to focus on a new level of experience, which we're seeing some of. The top right picture is a company called Avo. We have this in our office in New York. If you order anything by 10 a.m., it's delivered in a bag by 3 p.m. And this can be fresh fruit and whatever. And you can get ingredients for dinner so that just by coming to work, I'm leaving with a better evening than the one had I not come to work. So there's just a lot of conversation in whether our landlords are going to provide this or this is space we want to own and occupy as a tenant. I think it's going to depend on the client. But I think that kind of answers question and your members' question about, yeah, there's a lot of this. A lot of landlords are talking about how they can be part of the value proposition. And again, this was pre-pandemic. This is not just the pandemic that's caused that. Landlords were coming to the table in a new way in the last, 2 to 3 years, for sure.
Yeah, interesting.
Some of this might be
And
a little.
I was also thinking is meeting clients. How do you deal with meeting clients? You're not meeting them at home for sure. Do you want to meet them in a noisy coffee shop? Maybe not. I rather not. And and the thing is also, it depends on the job that you have. If you're a lawyer, you're not going to meet a client in a coffee shop. You can't, because there's confidential information. So it depends on your type of business, how much flexibility you have on building relationships. So
yeah, and the reliability, who do I call if I'm in a shared space and the AV doesn't work? Do I have the same support as when I go to my company's conference room and I call the IT folks, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's an interesting point. Not everyone is in sales, but this whole idea of meeting with clients, we are back to that honeymoon. It is widely acceptable that if my dog is barking, you can see the bath. I can meet with clients like this today. We will move beyond that. And we might say we're not going to travel, and maybe we will reduce some of our travel. But I would say as soon as someone's client is met with in person by another company, we're going to get back on airplanes and we're going to make those crazy meetings that are 1 hour that we had to fly to. I think that the client experience we're on pause a little bit. We accept something that we have to, but I think that we're going to see those client engagements. We want to make up for lost time.
Yeah, for sure. I had a call with our bank the other day, and there was a screaming infant in the back. And while we did get the job done, I felt bad for the representative at the bank, that she had to deal with all of that. With her baby, with my question, and then trying to help me online. I was like, oh my God, this is like, I wouldn't want my team to be in a situation like that, quite honestly. But we have another question. We have another question about the landlords. How can the landlord protect their real estate investment with so much uncertainty? And I feel that in comparison to what's happening in Europe, where where there's more government support in paying, we have the Paycheck Protection Program. That's great. But what's the program that is paying the rent? And the program that you can apply for to pay the rent is a loan. In Europe, it's not consistent across Europe, but in Germany, there is support. There are subsidies for the rent, and there are subsidies for, and that's residential real estate. That keep landlords, from not being able to pay their own mortgage. Well, what do you think is going to happen with that, with so much uncertainty and so much flexibility that that is needed on both sides, the landlord and the tenant side?
Well, if I could I'll get that, because this is basically what we're seeing all the time now. So landlords understand that it's not their market, and they are becoming very flexible, and they're giving concessions. There's tons of concessions they're giving. They're giving people, 2 or 3, 4, as far, I'm talking commercial, by the way. I do not do residential, but I do see that even, landlords looking for tenants to rent space in some of the larger buildings in Midtown Manhattan also are giving free rent on a residential side. So in the commercial side, they're doing the same thing. They're giving, for a 5-year deal, they'll give you, 10 months free rent. And, it's like for a 10-year deal, they'll give 12 to 18 months free rent. So landlords are adjusting. It's not easy. A lot of them are complaining because there's really nothing to turn to for them. But, you know, they've been profitable in New York for many, many, many years. You're not going to have too many people that are playing a violin and feel sorry for landlords. But they understand, and it's going
It's a
to
very
swing
small
back.
one.
It's going to swing back. Everybody knows it's going to swing back. This is just a moment in time. And when it swings back after this, you know, period that we're in right now, it will go from a tenant market back to a landlord market. I've seen it.
Right.
We saw it during 9/11, and we saw it during the economic crisis in '08, and now we have the pandemic. It swings, Yvonne. Right now, it's in the tenant's hands, and maybe in a year and a half, 2 years, no one has a crystal ball. It's going to go back to the landlord's hand. But I think a lot of people are going to make it. Don't worry about it.
So one other question in terms of strategy. So if in the beginning of the pandemic, you know, I was biking to the office to pick up member renewal checks. There was, I mean, Times Square wasn't a desert. There was no one around. So our landlords, and I don't know if that's a question, could be a question for both of you. Are landlords strategically filling buildings so that it's, you know, that you're not alone in the building? In the Times building, I talked to the security guards. There were days where we had 15 people in the entire building. I think we have how many floors in the New York Times building? 50, you know, and they had 15 people in the building. So, you know, this is not, I mean, you know, a building that I would want to walk into when there's nobody around. You want to keep the lights on. You want to look like you're busy. You want to look like you're occupied. Are landlords shifting, you know, from between buildings to keep certain areas occupied?
I mean, they always have an engineering staff. The larger buildings are always going to keep the machinery working. The engineers are always
of course,
in.
yeah.
But I don't see tenants shifting so that spaces are occupied. I mean, the building that I'm in on 3rd Avenue is anywhere between, I don't know, 5 and 10% occupied, and it's a 40-story building. And I know where Rachel is office, the same thing. It's probably between 10 and 15%. And from day to day, it increases certain times, and you know, it has increased and decreased over time. But I don't see that, unless you, Rachel, see that landlords are physically bringing people from one place to another. I haven't seen that.
No, and I think this actually presents an opportunity and a constraint for us in New York. I think the partnership between, you know, the public-private partnership is going to be really important. There's a lot of talk about how do we bring our city back and what do we do to change it, not in that short-term day-to-day that Yvonne, you just described, but even in the coming back. There's a perception of a safety concern. There's a perception of just not a lot of people around. And there's word out there that the MTA isn't going to have the money if they don't get federal funding, right? So there's a lot of things that I think we need to lean in and figure out how we are going to contribute to a recovering city. So as Jody said, not that we haven't been here before, but we have leaned in and we have. You heard Scott Reckler from RXR. This is a few months ago now. He was imploring us to come back to work. Please, this is our city. We need to do this for the service economy. We need to do this. I don't think it moved people. I mean, the fact of the matter was death was still potentially outside the doorstep. So people didn't come. Like, we're not behind this. The storm's not over. But I think the work will be to ensure that, you know, our city and our restaurants and the things that make New York great can come back. And, you know, I don't think that we have to sit on the sidelines, as Jody said, like we've done it before. And I think it's going to be, I do think it's going to be exciting when we can get there on how we invest landlords, occupiers, and government to make it great.
Yeah, I mean, I have a comment here that feeds into what Jody just said. A lot of landlords are actually pension funds, so they don't worry about the day-to-day rental income. And on the other hand, also the average lease, people are not breaking leases. I think that's why there's so much of a sublet market. So, you know, they're not going to make major changes now. They're holding out, you know, waiting to see how people react once we have the vaccine and, you know, coming back. But we want to talk about, you know, and I see you have the slide up, implication at the building level for people to come back safely. So, Rachel, do you want to get into that a little bit?
I think we've talked about it a little bit, but when we're talking about landlords, we've been talking about the financial side. And building owners have also been figuring out what do they need to do to improve their buildings. Again, even before the pandemic, there was a recognition in a hot market, we need to be better than the others. So the pandemic just gave them a focus, but there's a lot, there continues to be that buildings have installed touchless entry, right? So we're not having our lobbies are somewhat touchless. Some of it being dedicated entrances, building amenities, which is pretty widespread, everything from the opportunity to put bike storage in the building to potentially in Class A buildings, restaurants, or these conference centers. Anything that what they were looking to do was find ways to make real estate as a service in space that maybe wasn't leasable. But I don't, as a tenant, want to own it. I just want access to it. So we're talking about a wide range of client types and building types, but that was the idea, that we can amenitize a building that gives more organizations access to these services than those who can afford to have it for themselves.
This ties in with what we said earlier. You know, you offer meeting rooms and access. Yeah.
Yep. And some organizations will say, no way, I need it branded, or I need the confidentiality, or I can't get my technology on. So it's not for everyone, but it is a level that most organizations, if you think about the many organizations who lease space, might not be able to create something as nice in their own space. So giving access to it. And then came the air quality issue, which should always have been addressed, but it became more top of mind. We all became engineers. We know what a MERV 13 filter means. We know what fresh air volume means. So we're seeing buildings, the winter buildings, being able to show that the air quality is superior to other buildings. Had a client early on who wanted the separation of their ventilation system, which is not typical in a high-rise building, but seeing more ask for that. And then this idea of well-being, that we need to treat the whole person, and it's not just about coming to work and having nice coffee, but how can we create rooms that are shared in the building? How does a landlord create either a gym, but today's gyms don't look like yesterday's gyms, but maybe a yoga studio. Just saw a company who is selling mother's rooms to landlords so that you might have mother's rooms in the building in a suite that's even nicer than what you might find as a single room that is a mother's room. But the question is just, which side does this become, occupant owned or landlord owned and shared by occupants? So a lot of conversation on this going on, and to be honest, it's about time. We need to digitize our buildings. We can do a lot better than what landlords maybe were focused on.
On that note, Jody, do I remember it correctly, or was I just dreaming about that? Years back, I moved to New York 25 years ago, and I seem to recall that in the World Trade Center side, on the I don't remember what street that is, there was this big elevator going up. There was a how do you call it, a kita, a children, you know, a place where the mothers working in the building could drop off their kids. Do I remember that correctly?
Yeah, it was like a kinder center. They had different ones. And actually, I think the MetLife building had one where you could drop off your kid and the company was paying for them. Yes, that they've had that in a couple of buildings, and even a lot of insurance companies have it inherent in their office space, where they have programs for children. So yeah, that started to become very popular. I don't know, Rachel, have you seen any more designs in that level? I don't see them as
You
much
know,
as I.
it was so much more common in my experience in office parks in suburban places. I commute from outside the city and always love like the one woman who's got a stroller, but I think that it was less popular. There's a lot of code issues that you go through to put childcare in these buildings. So it's going to take lower level space that is often used for other things. So it hasn't been, I would say, that common. Yeah. But
I thought it was pretty brilliant when I saw it at the World Trade Center. I thought it was brilliant. You could drop your kid off in the morning and go down for whatever reason and check in on them. I mean, it's like, what's not to like? It's paid by the, I remember I had a member who stopped working when she got a kid because she said, what I'm making is paid to the nanny. So why should I not be my own nanny? And if you have a system like this, you can work because the kindergarten doesn't cost you anything because it's in the building and it's paid by the building or whoever. I mean, it's not that the landlord is paying for it or that the tenants are paying for it, for the pleasure of being in that building that has that amenity.
I think that the cost necessarily just priced out. The fight for the first and second floor of space is for so many uses. And that's where if you're going to have young children, they have to be there because of codes. The only one story of during the pandemic is that Bloomberg set up a number of spaces in their building set up for school. So they had like a monitor, a human monitor, and people could bring their kids to do school during the day. I have no idea if it actually happened, did well or not. It's the only one I know who was saying we'll help in that way. And it wasn't for young children, school-age children.
Yeah, that's how, and I think, that will go away because we're trying to open up the schools again. So, that is, I don't think that this is a solution that every building needs to set up their own little schoolhouse. God help us, because we want to get the kids back, but it's better than nothing, to have the kids together at least, and you're not all like sitting at home. It's still online learning, but at least you're doing it with a couple of other kids around, because that's the real challenge with online learning.
And I'd be really curious, considering who our crowd is, like, what is a European model? We're putting this in the context of a very U.S. model. How does Europe and how has Europe looked at these issues differently? I'd be curious. I just don't have enough knowledge to know.
Yeah, I think this whole working from home is not altogether not a European thing, because we care much more about work-life balance. So when people are at home, we've done a whole program about, can you email somebody at 9 o'clock or can you call someone on a cell phone, on an office issued cell phone over the weekend? And will they feel the pressure to answer it? This has been a lawsuit in Europe. I don't think that, I think people are much keener to go back to the office in Europe than they are here. There are always exceptions, but I think percentage-wise, they are much keener to go back than maybe here what I'm hearing here in the U.S. But we have about 10 minutes left, and I'm monitoring questions coming in. But one thing, what do both owners and tenants need to know what are like the 5 key things, both of you, that you want landlords and tenants to take away to think about to deal with the next 6 months of their internal planning?
I don't know. I could name a few things. For tenants, you know, they have to strategize. It's definitely going to, we are in a window right now for both landlords and tenants to strategize. And the strategy they take right now in this 6 month or in this 9 month window will be very important for their future. So, you know, they have to have a strategy. Everybody has to have a strategy in place. As I said before, there are going to be tenants that just survive, and landlords that just survive, and there's going to be ones that thrive. Landlords that take this opportunity to rebuild, to reset, to get clean air, to check over their office systems, to make sure that they are on target with touchless where they could be touchless, and offering things that Rachel had spoke to, are landlords that will be successful in attracting companies in the future. And tenants that go to their landlords now and say to their landlords now, my lease is up in a year, my lease is up, and tenants should be represented by brokers. And I know it's self-serving to say that, but every landlord has a broker that represents the landlord. So we're doing it all the time. The city is very small for us. Landlords, we all know, and we know what the landlord's concessions are, and the tenants should be in receipt of those concessions. Every landlord's giving concessions. The tenant should take advantage of that now because it will affect them in the future. So I think that the opportunity is now, and I think that if you're a tenant, you have to definitely look at your lease. If you have 2 years left or 3 years left, you have to begin your strategy now. And same with the landlord fixing up his building to attract the tenants to stay and to attract tenants to come.
That's interesting. Rachel?
I would just add that real estate strategy should never be the first piece of strategy what Jody just said. Who the business is, who the business anticipates, or what they do anticipate them to be. And I would venture to say, think as long-term as you can imagine and recognize that you're on a journey. You're not going to go from now to that future state. But understanding those elements is going to put the context behind what your real estate strategy should be. So it's going to differ why you want to ask for free rent and an extended lease termination for one client and why you want to be able to get out quickly for another. And I'm not saying that the financial implications of your lease aren't part of your strategy, but if you need to cut costs, that's one thing. If you need to grow or you need to change your business model, lead there and then think about how you respond in the workplace and then how the workplace responds within your real estate. We've never been the first step to a business. And so I think it's gotten to be the hot topic because it's a big expense and you're sitting there with something you haven't used in a year. That makes sense. And the CFOs of the world look at that on the balance sheet and say, get rid of that. We're not using that. But there's a reason you had it. There may be the reason that you need it again. And there's a lot of work. If you want to make these dramatic changes to your real estate, recognize your business is going to have to do some work too. And this may not be the time you want to invest in that. So anyone who's saying, we're going to start hoteling, we're going to share space, you've got to invest. You've got to invest in your people. You've got to invest in a change program. You've got to invest in finding new ways to convey that culture and that purpose and that connectivity. That may be fine, but if you're in product development mode and you better get your product out the door, now might not be the time that you want to put your energy. That was long-winded, but hopefully that made sense.
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, what I'm hearing is, landlords need to think about upgrading their building, maybe amenities. Maybe the Biden infrastructure plan, will help with that, greening them, but also making them more, pandemic proof and livable and, allowing, making them healthier. Tenants prepare now and really think it through strategically. I agree with you. I think just shedding real estate space and cutting down now in the anticipation that, you will only have half the staff working is very short-sighted. And you may, pay dearly for, to get that real estate back. when you need it, when everybody has come to that conclusion that, oh my God, my people want to go back to the office. How am I going to get my real estate back? Because then the landlords are back in the driver's seat and they're going to make you pay for it. But I also agree with Jody's, and I have appropriately, my coffee mug is I love New York. I've been here during 9/11, and I agree with Jerry Seinfeld. This is not the end of New York, and there are, I said that during our test call. I have a moving truck outside of my building, not today, every day in my apartment building. But people are coming back. This is a temporary thing, and I don't think that we can count out New York by any means. So I'm very bullish on New York. There's more to New York than a telephone on a desk, without a question. I'm thinking if we have one other question, but I'm not sure, if maybe Rachel can answer that. Have any landlords been able to reduce their assessment for property tax liabilities? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't know. Jody, are you aware of any?
No, I'm not aware of that at all. No. I mean, they could always apply for tax certiorari proceedings. There are different things that they could do, but I haven't heard of any landlords actually receiving any breaks as far as taxes are concerned.
Yeah, I mean, because then I can't see that either, because isn't that what pays for the schools and for other services? So I would think that the the local governments are not particularly keen on cutting property tax, because it pays for so many services, in a city and in a state. But good, I think if we don't, a quick check if we have more questions. I think we don't. So with that, I, thank you very much, Jody and Rachel, really interesting discussion. And this then concludes today's webinar. And we will send out the presentation to everyone after the event. If you have additional questions, if you need to help think through your own strategy, what you want to do with your particular space, do reach out to both Jody and Rachel and ask your your individual questions. And as a reminder, if you are a member of the EACC and you see any of the attendees on the handout that we're sending in a minute, that you want to talk to, let us know. We're happy to connect you. And with that, enjoy the rest of your day.